again, welcome to another one of the sessions of English lessons. And today we're going to focus on modal verbs. This is Dr. English. I'm Dr. Mafi, a PhD in Applied Linguistics. And what we're going to focus today on is the modal verbs, not in fact in close-up, but we're going to shift to something like a part of the modal verbs, because already we talked about the modal verbs in one of the other videos, and if you have any questions you can leave your comments there or ask any questions you have there. Don't hesitate to ask those questions there under the comments below. But here today we're going to just talk generally about the modal verbs and then move on to a very particular point that is a part, as I said, of the modal verbs. Well, what are the modal verbs in English? What do they function? What's their role? Modal verbs, as suggested by its title, it's a kind of verb. It's a kind of verb, like auxiliary verbs. We have the main verbs, like open, close, like, walk, drive. We have the auxiliary verbs, have, has, do, does, and all of the to be forms, am, is, are, was, were. These are auxiliary verbs. They are a kind of helping verbs. Auxiliary verbs are a kind of helping verb. So do the modal verbs. They are also helpful. They actually help our verbs. They help us communicate more easily. How? For example, can and could refer to ability. Refer to ability. Will, would, and also sometimes shall and should refer to future events, right? When you want to talk about future, we use will and would, shall and should sometimes. But mostly shall and should, or even should in specifically, refer to a kind of obligation, a kind of necessity. I'll talk about this more in detail here. Well, and we also have may and might. May and might. They refer to probability, possibility, right? Probability or possibility. For example, you say it may rain or it might rain. There's 20 or 30% chance of rain today. So we use these modal verbs to refer to convey the message of probability. And also we have has to or have to. Has to or have to. The past tense had to. And we also have must. Both of them refer to necessity. Necessity. All right? Let me compare should with must and have to and has to. Now, in positive or affirmative structures, these are the examples I'd like to share with you. I have to score at least 70 to pass the course, to pass the term, right? I have to score 70 to pass the course. And normally the courses have 100 points. And you need to, as a student, score 70 to pass it, to pass your examination, right? Anything under 70 would be a failure. So you fail the course. So you have to pass the course. You have to pass the course. Anything under it or lower marks would cause you to fail the course. Okay? So this necessity comes from outside. When we use have to or has to, this necessity comes from outside of you. That's the difference. That's the difference between have to and has to, and we talk about must and should later in the following examples. So when we use have to and has to, we are talking about a kind of necessity that doesn't belong to you. You are not under in control, or the things you're working with cannot be brought under your control because they are outside of you. There's somebody else involved. For example, your boss tells you to do something at work, in office, right? If you are in your office and your boss tells you to do something, you have to do it. You have to do it because this necessity comes from outside of you. It's not you, right? So whether you like it or not, you need to do it. It's necessary for you to do it. So this necessity comes from outside of you, all right? Your boss tells you to do something. And here the students have to score higher than 70, right? 70 and upwards, higher grades or points to pass their course or pass their examinations. Because this is a standard given to you from outside of you, from the educational system, from your teachers, institutions, schools, academies, tell you to do something, and you don't have a say in it. It's not under control, right? So you have to study hard. You have to pass or score 70 to pass the term. Or, well, this is my funny example all the time. I say, he has to wash the dishes at home. He has to wash the dishes at home, yes. All right? Well, has to because it comes from somebody else. His wife tells him to do something, right? So he has to wash the dishes. It's not under his control. Whether he likes it or not, he has to do it. Okay? Now, we come to must. What is must? Again, must is a kind of modal verb that refers to or reflects necessity. But this necessity comes from you. It doesn't come from outside of you. All right? For example, if this is 0 to 70, this is the grade, the point in class or examination, and you can go up to 100, right? Up to 100. But 70, you think to yourself, 70 is not such a good point, such a good score, such a good grade. 70 is not such a good grade. It's just the minimum grade to pass your course. So I think I must study harder. You think, not the teachers tell you, right? You think you must study harder to score higher than 70 because 70 is not such a good score, such a good point or grade, right? So you think you must do it. This necessity is within you. You think you need to do it. It doesn't come from outside of you. It's under your control. All right? So you think to yourself, it's not appropriate. 70 is not such a good appropriate score. Okay? In class, you need to get 90, 95, 98, if not 100. Okay? Now, let's move on to ought to or should, right? Sometimes we use ought to. It's a kind of old one, but some people still use it. And more often, should, right? It's another one of the modal verbs that refer to a kind of necessity or obligation, but this necessity is not comparable with have to and has to and must that I put it actually in a rectangle. Should, like this example, it's somehow becoming clearer. The youth should respect the elderly. The youth should respect the elderly. It's a kind of moral necessity, moral obligation, ethical obligation. All right? It's bad according to the societal norms. According to the societal norms, the norms accepted in the community or society, that people think that it's not good, it's not appropriate, for example, to act in a rude way. You need to be polite, right? You need to be moral or ethically acceptable. So the youth, the young, should respect or should say hi to their parents, for example, first. All right? Don't wait until their parents tell them, for example, say hi. So they need to start saying hi. Okay? So the youth should respect the elderly. All right? The senior citizens or their parents, for example. The children should respect their parents. This ought to is a moral, ethical necessity. Okay? Well, I talked about the affirmative sentences, if you separate should from the first two, which I put in a rectangle here, must and have to and has to, which one is stronger, do you think? Well, obviously, in affirmative sentences, have to and has to is stronger than must. In affirmative structures, have to and has to is stronger than must, because this necessity comes from outside. Your boss tells you to do something, right? So you need to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to be dismissed. You're going to be laid off job, right? So they fire you if you don't do that. Well, but in negative structures, it's completely the other way around. It's very funny, but true. In negative structures, mustn't is stronger than doesn't or don't have to, right? Sometimes we have don't, sometimes we have doesn't, right? Doesn't. But still, after that, we have to. It doesn't change, right? So doesn't or don't have to is less strong than mustn't. If I tell you, you mustn't go there, it's dangerous. You mustn't go to the jungle or forest alone. Why? Because it's dangerous. You mustn't go there. But if I tell you, you don't have to do it, you don't have to go there, it means that it's not necessary for you to do it. If you don't do it, there wouldn't be any punishment. There wouldn't be any danger. Or you're not going to be at risk, for example. All right? So in negative structures, mustn't is stronger than don't or doesn't have to. But in affirmative structures, have to and has to is stronger than must. Okay? Well, if you have any questions, remember to put your questions in the comments below. You know what to do. And until another video, take care.